Hey guys, this is the rest of the bacteria, and maybe we get into the viruses and be done with Module 9 on this video. But this is the bacteria. We want to talk about them in nature because we said most of them were good guys. They're not bad guys, and so most of them we want to talk about how number one they're recyclers, and then about bioremediation. And so nitrogen cycle. Go back to our module on ecology where we talked about the different cycles, the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, the phosphorus cycle, and such. And so the nitrogen cycle is a big one that uses bacteria, and I think we're going to talk about it here in just a minute. One of the words that's for your vocab is microbial bioremediation, and that is when we use bacteria, saprophytic, and whenever we see that term saprophytic, I want you guys to think about that. That's we're talking about decomposers, which if you're a heterotroph, you're either an omnivore or carnivore or herbivore, or if you know those three, then you're a decomposer, which means you eat organic matter, dead things, dying, and recycle them back into the environment. Well, we're going to add pollution to this one as bioremediation. Our sewage plant uses anaerobic bacteria, and you get this stuff called sludge. And I can't remember in way back in physical science. I think we just talked about the power plants. I don't think we talked about water treatment plants. Um, but anyway, they will recycle the water in this decomposed stuff down to this stuff called sludge, and this sludge really is super great to put on your gardens because it's if you know about your gardens, your garden pH. This is helps with that, and is like the best lime there can be if you want to put it on your crops. Um, it also helps to remove fertilizers and pesticides that have been leached into the water supply, such as arsenic and mercury. And then in the BP oil spill, there are bacteria that ate the oil into droplets, and then the droplets were just easier to pick up. And then some bacteria we found that produce a detergent that helps dissolve oil. So again, the idea that we're going to use recyclers to help us in the environment, they're doing it anyway. If we go back to your sewage treatment plants, most of our sewage treatment plants, I think this is going to take us to a sewage treatment plant. Most of our sewage treatment plants are very similar to if you have well, I don't live in town. I live out in a rural area, but this is the same way that that we use. And when you flush Rid-X or something like that down your toilet, that takes care of it. So you're putting in the bacteria to eat up, and then sometimes you have to have it pumped, so you have to have the sludge pumped out of your septic tank. Okay, so I think that's kind of cool. So as we go on, we want to talk about bacteria in humans, and we did talk about it before. Kind of made a little uh, inference about the bacteria important, that the lactobacillus and then the uh, phytobacterium are in your intestines, and they make vitamin B12 and vitamin K. And we can look at those two things, and I'll come back to them here in a second. So again, this is we're talking about our probiotics, and because one of the things about that happens when you take an antibiotic, it kills all your bacteria, your good bacteria, your what they call your normal flora, and along with the bad guys. And so you want to keep the good guys, the lactobacillus and the bifidobacterium into your system. So here's some benefits of the bifidobacteria, and you can see here it helps with your heart. It helps with just a lot of different things. Boosts your immunity, your gastrointestinal tracts. So it's good to have the good bacteria. Same thing with your lactobacillus. This gut health idea that to be really healthy. Your gut has to be healthy, and a lot of times that's probably what's wrong is that you have something wrong with your imbalance with the bacteria in your gut. So you guys can check those out from the slides if you want to or not. We learned that in the biotech industry, we make insulin. and antibiotics and vitamins. We saw that the thermophiles can use their enzymes to produce food and medicine chemicals. So just a whole bunch of different things. There's many foods that are made with bacteria, cheese, and one of the labs you guys do is yogurt. Make your own yogurt, buttermilk, sour cream, kimchi, all kinds of stuff, pickle, sauerkraut, just all the kinds of things. And again, your experiment 9.2, you guys will make some yogurt. So if you want to, it's pretty cool little activity there. So here's the bacteria again, talking about the good guys and the bad guys, and talking about what they do. So you can get this from eating yogurt, kimchi. So again, good to have these bacteria in your system. So keeping on with bacteria and diseases, we want to talk about bacteria, and we've talked about how most bacteria live in a mutualistic relationship where they benefit from us and we benefit from them, or it's a commensalistic relationship where we benefit. I mean, they benefit and we're not harmed from them. But a few of these guys are parasitic. They're parasites. And so we want to talk about some of these guys and we'll talk about some of the things that they do. There are a few pathogenic bacteria. So they cause disease, they damage cells and tissues, or they produce toxins. So they're either going to eat your cells or they're going to produce some toxins that are going to cause damage to your cells. Okay, so that's kind of where we're at with our bacteria. And again, when we get into the protists and we talk about some of the protists having some pathogenic abilities, you know, either they cause it, something that they produce causes it, or they eat the cells, they damage the tissue, they just send your body into the immune system into kind of chaos, and that's what a parasite wants to do. One of them I want to kind of talk about is tuberculosis, and then kind of talk about the get into the immune system here in a little bit. But tuberculosis is heterotropic and it invades two places. It invades your lungs and it also destroys your lung cells, but it also kills your white blood cells that come to defend it. Now, tuberculosis is not a disease right now that we see. If we see it in our population, we see it in our immune compromised people that get tuberculosis. So this is where we see it, and you guys can look through it. It is one of those ones that you can get from if somebody coughs and you're in the same room, or you can get it that way. So kind of a direct kind of contact. And so you can kind of look through the overview here. It does damage your lungs. You usually used to have a TB test before you could teach. Like I had to have like a when in a checkup, and when I had a checkout, I had to have a physical, and so that was one of the ones that they made us have. And a lot of people either have this, gotten over it, and maybe you don't have an active case of it. Those again that have some kind of immune deficiency or immune compromised system tend we tend to see tuberculosis in those populations, and you can see that it's a close contact. It's usually in a place that's not really got a great airflow. There's just a lot of things that are related to this that, and again, why we don't see it anymore. We or see it less than we used to see it in the turn of the century. Because you got to think, go back to challenge one when you were talking about the industrial age and how everybody was working in cramped quarters, and it was there wasn't a lot of airflow and everybody was breathing on everybody, and it wasn't really great. You weren't getting good nutrition. It wasn't really a great place to work, and that allowed for that to spread. Okay, so again, not a great microbe at all. And it is one of those ones that's kind of a neat microbe. It's a mycobacterium bacteria, which is again one of those that kind of defies some of the bacteria that we've been talking about. When we talked about gram positive, gram negative, this one's a little bit harder, not necessarily harder to ID, but it's very specified when you go to ID it. Um, so tuberculosis. Some pathogenic bacteria produce toxins. So there's two kind of toxins. There's an exotoxin. That's one of your vocab words, which is a poison results as the growth and the metabolism of bacteria, and that's Clostridium botulism. We're going to talk about that here. And then there's an endotoxin, which is the poisonous lipid in the bacterial wall that's released when the bacteria die and the cell walls break up, and that's Salmonella and that's E. coli. We'll talk about those. So let's just do a little bit of botulism talking about it because this is an interesting one. And again, this is another one that we saw at the turn of the century, but we don't see too much today. We don't ever hear of anybody dying from botulism toxin poisoning. Okay, we just don't see it. One of the things is this comes from cans. Like if you're canning home cans and preserved fermented food, and you don't can it properly, then what happens is the bacteria grow and they produce this toxin and it gets in the can. Now, again, one of the things that you can do to kill it is if you heat it up. Um, First, you heat it up. Well, number one, if you can it properly, that's awesome, and you won't get it. But then if you heat it up properly, then you're not going to get it. It's gonna denature that toxin, and you won't get it. Okay. Some of the foods that's interesting, like tomatoes and green beans, and it's on. This bacteria is everywhere, so it's gonna be a chance is going to be in those cans. So you want to make sure you can your food well. Used to be too, like if your can in the store was dented, then my grandma would never buy it because that was what she was thinking. Well, nowadays the canning process even then is such a good high rate that the chances of it having botulism in it is almost nil. And then again, you heat it, you cook it, or you put it in the microwave and that takes care of it. Botulism can also be like an infant botulism and can cause baby's intestines. So that again, there's some things that we see from this again, but it's coming from a bacteria that's very normal in the environment, and mainly coming from times that it's not canned properly. Okay, so so low oxygen, no oxygen environment, low acidity. So not really tomatoes, like more like beans, peas, canned things like that. Low sugar, low salt. So those are the good conditions for them. It's a cool looking bacteria. Now it's a Clostridium, so these are all the anaerobic guys in here. And one of the things, not cool, that this toxin can do is that if you get it, it causes difficulty in breathing and muscle paralysis, and it can cause even death. So this is not a food poison that makes you throw up. This is not a food poison that you can smell something and go, oh, I don't think I'm going to eat this. This is a food poisoning that causes your muscles kind of to relax and you can't move them, and you have a real hard time. And so again, that's what's happening there. Now, good thing about this bacteria, if there's a good thing or a side thing about it, is the medical use of this bacteria. And you've heard it. It's botulism toxin. So Botox. So Botox, they inject it in, and it blocks the neurotransmitter causing muscle paralysis, and so you get rid of your wrinkles. And so this is one of those cosmetics things. And so we're seeing this more and more Botox injections. So um, again, here's a bad guy that we can use some of its stuff from it. So let's take a look at E. coli, and then we're going to look at Salmonella here. Now, E. coli and Salmonella and most of your other food poisonings, you smell it, you know it's not good. Or you look at it and your food doesn't look right. There's a film on it, there's a crust on it. It just doesn't look right. So usually these will tell you that, hey, you probably shouldn't eat this. Okay. Sometimes when you do get some of these food poisonings, it didn't have a chance to sit up, and then it gets inside you and then gives you a good 24, 48 hours. If it goes more than that, then definitely you need to see a doctor about if you definitely if you can't keep anything down with that. So let's talk about E. coli first, and then we'll talk about Salmonella. E. coli, there's a whole bunch of different types of E. coli. And again, E. coli is a bacteria that can be a good guy and it can be a bad guy. So if you can get a bad one of these, and E. coli can cause uh, usually what call the top three: diarrhea, vomiting, and cramps. So you get the top three symptoms. You get a little bit of a bloody diarrhea with the ones that can really hurt you. And again, so if you're exposed to this contaminated food or water, and one of the things too, like they test, like we live out here in a rural area, so they test our wells. Well, my mom and dad's well that they tested had coliform bacteria. Well, this is all that group of E. coli and all their buddies, and it comes from cattle. And this used to be a farm, and so the cows have been here, and this E. coli's in the ground, and it's seeped down into the water table. So my parents had to run Clorox down their well several times to clean it all out. So healthy people, like this says, healthy people usually recover from an infection within a week. It's the little kids and the older people that we worry about, that can have life threatening things with E. coli. Now, one of the things about E. coli is if you're looking for meat, your steaks are fine because you're gonna cook and sear the outside, and there's not like these pieces for it to hang on to. But like when you grind hamburger and you grind beef for hamburger, or make hamburgers out of, or you're grinding it for tacos, you want to make sure it's cooked well, because any of those little pieces, those surface areas, and remember we talked about surface area back in chemistry, those E. coli can hang on to, and they get caught in there. Think of a hamburger, they get caught in there, it gets warm, they like warmth, and they get very active, and you're eating that hamburger and it's raw, then yeah, the chances are you're gonna get E. coli from that. Okay, whether or not it's severe or not depends on how much you get. Depends on the strain that you get of E. coli. So there's the big one is 157H7 is the big one of the big main bad boy of the E. coli's for that. So again, this is a typical uh, food poisoning. You're gonna see it. You're gonna get the top three symptoms. If it's in your meat, you're probably not gonna see it, especially if it's a hamburger and you don't cook it well. If you leave it in your refrigerator long enough, you are. I mean, I would not eat any kind of hamburger that's been left over and it's got a film on it. It doesn't look right. Okay, you can cook it really, really done and maybe eat it, but still, I don't think that that's very, very wise for you guys to do that. So, okay, so those some food poisoning. We're gonna drop down here and talk, since we're still talking about food poisoning. Let's talk about two more. And let's talk about salmonella here, and then we're gonna come back to cholera and talk about cholera. Okay, so when we talk about salmonella food poisoning, this is another one of those, and there's a large amount of salmonella. There's salmonellas in chicken. That's why I say you always wash your meat again. You wash your meat off. You make sure it's clean. And I'm not saying that when chickens go through the factory that it falls in poop, but it could. And this is why a lot of people are going to raise in their own food, because they know where it's coming from. They know how it's processed. They know how how it was killed, and how the meat was processed. So it's a good thing that you do that, or at least okay. Or again, just cook it. Salmonella is a smelly one. It's one that you can smell pretty well. There are different types of salmonella, and you can see here there's people, dogs, cats, horses. There were animal feeds recalled because of salmonella. I want to say there was even like peanut butter recalled, and it may have been an E. coli recall because of where they were processing the peanut butter. So again, uh, in those situations, food poisoning, you need to really, really be careful. So just a little bit more about. It says there's 1.35 million cases of salmonella, with 226,500 hospitalizations, and so 420 deaths from contaminated food. Again, we do a pretty good job of how we uh, handle our food, how we cook our food, how we prepare our food, how we take care of our animals. So less and less we see of this one. Okay, so talk a little bit about cholera real quick. And so as we talk about cholera, one of the things is there are certain diseases that again, like when there's a tornado or a hurricane and water supplies are hurting, these food poisoning diseases, water contaminant diseases can happen, and cholera is one of them. And cholera is a waterborne disease. That we pretty much have gotten rid of because we treat our water. We don't drink water that's not been treated. We there's the water treatment. You ever want to go to a water treatment plant? Check it out because they're under such restringents that they have to make sure that the water is clean. They have to put so much bleach or well Clorox, and one of the plants in Asheville actually uses ozone, runs ozone through it to kill anything that's there. So, but this wasn't the case 200 years ago, and this is Dr. Snow that we mentioned before. And this is the if you ever looked at Project Wet and done the case of the poison pump, this is the one, and you actually sit and you solve the case of the poison pump. And here's the different places to where the pumps were at, and then here are all the cases of cholera. And you got to understand too, during this time period, cholera kills a lot of people. Um, just because it's again, we're not living in a great environment. Again, look how close everybody is, and especially in cities, even today, if we're not careful if of the water. So again, he convinced them to turn the pump off to where the cholera was happening. Actually, I think the what was happening was this was actually coming from one of the meat processors that was around there that the water was getting contaminated with. So um, you guys can check that out too. It's an interesting story, kind of all along the line of. It reminds me a little bit of Ignace Remmelus, where he convinced everybody to wash their hands, but they didn't wash their hands. They convinced them to wash their hands, delivering a baby, and then but they still didn't wash their hands necessarily when they did surgery. So again, they just didn't apply stuff over and over again. And so again, that's a great story if you guys want to check that one out. Some of the other diseases you can check out: the pneumonia, and then the tooth decay. Streptococcus one loves sugar. And so if you don't brush your teeth, if you don't take care of your teeth, then that bacteria can cause you some tooth decay and things like that. So when your parents tell you don't eat sugar at night or to brush your teeth, that's what's going on. The last two we want to kind of talk about. I want to talk about tetanus first, and then come back to Lyme disease, because tetanus is also Clostridium, so he belongs to the same group with botulism, and he does the opposite that botulism does. So tetanus, one of the things about tetanus is tetanus causes your muscles to contract. So this is that lockjaw idea, and again, this is a toxin that it produces, and it causes your muscles to contract. So you actually, your muscles, you die in a state of contraction, basically. And so we don't see this because we get a vaccine. So your Tdap, it was called, when I got it, it was DPT, um, so diphtheria, DP, the pertussis, and tetanus. So there's three of them that you get in there, and all three are very active in our environment. Um, Mainly, we don't see tetanus because sometimes the tetanus shot, but we also don't see tetanus because we do take care of our wounds. We clean our wounds very quickly, very fast. But then if you can still develop that. So there's the Tdap, the TD, the T. I don't know what the A is in that one, but anyway, so you can look through here, but it's a Clostridium. It's one we get a vaccine for. Tetanus, diphtheria is another one, and then pertussis is whooping cough. So those are all interesting ones that you should have a vaccine for. Whooping cough is very distinctive, and you would know that if you had it, and it's very contagious. And diphtheria is another one that you can pick up. It's not as contagious, but they can be deadly. if they're not treated. And usually when you go to school, you have to have at least the DTaP shot. Okay. So that takes care of those. And so that leaves us with Lyme disease. And Lyme disease is from a tick bite. And it's one of those, I don't know, it's not a new one. It's been here for a while. We're seeing more and more of it just because we see more and more people out in the woods and hunting and again, not, um, yeah, taking precautions when you're out there, not wearing long pants and sleeves, and spraying your clothes down with DEET. We spray with a paramethium spray all our clothes during turkey hunting season. You don't spray yourself with it, but you spray your clothes with it, and that keeps them away. So we've been pretty good about that. Also, like your dogs and your cats, you need to give them the tick treatments and the flea treatments, so that way those things, they don't come. They come into your house. They don't won't hop on you and give you that. But I've had friends um, that have gotten Lyme disease and had some of them. It's not a bad thing. They've gotten over it. Probably don't even know it. And then a couple of them have had really hard time. I've had one that had to go to Texas that had to be treated with some very, very high powered antibiotics. And then another one had to go on a different diet regimen to help him, to help his body, boost his body to get rid of it. So again, precaution when you're in the woods for this one, for Lyme disease. Okay, so this is table 9.4, so you can check them out, or you can check them out here. Um, so we looked at the exotoxins, the endotoxins. So let's talk a little bit about how do we avoid them, because they're everywhere. We said that the majority of got a lot of them living on our skin, and so your first line of defense for any of this is your skin, your mucus lining of your nose and your mouth, your digestive tract. They all keep stuff out. So if you don't have a cut, if you cut yourself, you need to clean it, you need to wash it, you need to put an antibiotic on it, you need to put Neospore, whatever you're going to use to put on it. You need to. It doesn't hurt to wash it out with alcohol and hydrogen peroxide, because hydrogen peroxide gets those anaerobes bacteria. Um, your mucus lining of your nose, uh, your mouth. Don't again. These are just all things that keeps things out. Again, Dr. Sturmelis was the first one to propose to wash your hands, to maintain good hygiene. Believe it or not, to get adequate sleep and to eat good meals to keep your immune system strong. So if I used to tell students, it's like if you're you get a healthy diet. If you eat at least um, 2 to 3 good meals a day, where you're eating all your, you're getting vegetables and you're getting meat and you're getting uh, milk and things like that, then yeah, that's really good. So you're getting that, and it should help your immune system. Um, get enough sleep. Believe it or not, one of the things that we're seeing is melatonin. It helps you get a good sleep, a good restful sleep, and is also one of those vitamins that helps protect you. Well, not protect you, but helps you boost your immune system enough to where you may be able to ward off some um, simple infections. Again, seal your food, canning, pasteurizing. Okay, dehydrate your food, because once the water is gone, then bacteria can't grow on it. Freeze it or refrigerate it. It slows the bacteria growth down, but be careful. It slows it down. It doesn't mean that they died. Okay, because then when it gets warm, it's always really good. Stick it in the microwave and for a few minutes or a minute, definitely 30 seconds or more, and it should kill anything that happens to be there. Um, Most bacteria are opportunists, and when given a chance, a low immune system, they're going to cause an illness, and then you're going to need medicines like antibiotics to slow and prevent bacterial growth um, of those. So again, those are things, and you got to remember how bacteria produce, and some of them, when they produce, they become resistant to antibiotics. So we've got this staph infection called MRSA, and we're seeing that happen. And where if you have MRSA, you're really going to have to be treated, and like you have to gown up when you go in and things like that. So those are when we see that they become antibiotic resistant. We have to be careful with. Um, so let's walk through some of an infection, and then we'll come back and talk about some other things. So immune system. So your immune system, you've got a non-specific defense, and so that's your skin. So your first line, and then your second line defense, with your white blood cells that run around and just eat things. So if you ever have an infection and on a cut, and you see this white stuff coming out, pus coming out, that's some white blood cells that have been killed, been doing what they're supposed to be doing. Then your adaptive defense mechanisms are more specific, and so this is just kind of a brief overlook of your immune system. Again, you can check it out here, and get more specific of the immune system, acquired immunity and natural immunity. And we're going to talk about this when we talk about viruses, because viruses, antibiotics don't work against them, and we're going to talk about that with that. So here we got an infectious agent, got damaged cells. So your body automatically releases some proteins and some other chemicals, and they cause your blood cells to dilate, some more blood. So it's good that you bleed, but it's not good that you bleed too much. So again, too much of a good thing is a bad thing. So you capillaries, so you get redness and heat, you get pain and swelling. So pain's not a good thing, but too much pain. Then you get your clotting proteins enter, and then you get your platelets there, and they get there. And so again, you can just see this whole schematic right here. If you want to see more of it, here it takes you to the class again. You can kind of get into seeing more about it. Okay, so let's answer a few questions, and then we'll gonna get into viruses maybe in this section, or we'll come back and might come back and do viruses as the last section. So give 3 examples of how humans use bacteria. Again, we can go back to the bioremediation. We use it to make yogurt. We use them to make cheese. Again, 2 kinds of bacterial poisons. We talked about endotoxins and exotoxins. So exotoxins are produced as a result of the bacteria working, and then endotoxins are produced as they die. Okay, so hopefully this has been good for you, and seeing everything. We're going to come back and do viruses and wrap up this module for you. Thank you.